if a country specializes in exporting agricultural products and food products, which are usually also agricultural, it usually faces higher transaction costs for a simple reason that this type of product, they need more stringent controls in terms of standards. Because for instance, when you are dealing with agricultural raw materials or foods, you are dealing with items which can very easily endanger the health of people and, let's say, fauna and flora. So therefore, the standards are much more stringent, compliance regulations are much more stringent, for instance, compared to industrial products.
One of the issues that is actually creating problems is the existence of the so-called sanitary and phytosanitary measures, which tend to prove very costly to overtake, especially from small producers. And that is the reason why agriculture is proving to be such a controversial issue within the WTO agenda and the Doha development round. Now, you're definitely right, especially in the continent like Africa, where the majority of producers are actually smallholder farmers. These are issues which need to be tackled because for them, the cost of overtaking this sanitary, phytosanitary measures, so paying to do certain analysis to prove that your goods are not infested by certain pests and so on, they respect and abide by the standards to enter into, say, developed country markets, that is a critical issue.
It is a big problem because a huge component of the exports of African countries is composed of agricultural raw materials and food. Okay? And that means that they face higher transaction costs compared to, let's say, industrialized countries. Now, in addition to that, they don't necessarily have the infrastructure to enable them to conform to standards, because you need things like laboratories, where you can control the content of the product to be sure that maybe they don't contain ingredients which will make them bounce once they come to the border, not being allowed into a foreign country, especially when you trade with industrialized or advanced countries which have very high standards. And they have the technologies to immediately check whether your products meet those standards.
In markets in Maputo were over flooded but with products from South Africa, agricultural products that actually the farmers in Mozambique could produce and should sell, but they couldn't compete.
Economic theory would say is that trade is good because at the end of the day, in your example, for instance, it is true that those producers who compete with the imported goods, they're worse off. But you also have to think that consumer can access those goods at a cheaper price. So what the theory says is that if you weigh the two effects, normally consumers would actually, the benefit for consumers would actually offset the negative effect on your producers. Plus, and that is true for trade facilitation, normally when you simplify procedure for export, you also have an effect on import and vice versa. So you also have to think that by, for example, harmonizing standards and so on, you're also benefiting Mozambican exporters to South Africa, typically, if you harmonize procedures.
But they cannot compete.
Well, they cannot compete on certain products, but they probably can compete on other agricultural products, I suspect. So the idea would actually be trade tends to be good because it allows each country to specialize on those sectors where it is in relative term most competitive. Of course, due attention has to be paid to the acquisition of productive capabilities. And that's why there's the old argument of the infant industry that you have to temporarily protect certain industries until they acquire the capacity to compete internationally.
There are just two solutions. One, African countries must realize that they must use more of their own budget resources, to make sure that they have the capacity to comply with the standards, do all the necessary testing and measurements to make sure that they comply with the standards. And at the international level, that is of course the second component of the solution. The development cooperation, development assistance which we have should also be directed towards enabling the African countries to meet these standards, to be able to make the necessary tests, and that will create a kind of confidence in the importer countries, which are usually these advanced countries, that products coming from Africa, they don't cause a danger if they come into a market. So once that is established at the international level, then it will be easier. This transaction cost might go down. But of course, we all know that the best solution is for African countries to move away from being too much dependent on agricultural products. They increase the content of industrial products in their total exports as well.